once again. This is Nuance, and I am Mike Scala in HD. Of course, we'll be speaking of a few different topics, including the new single, Bring Rawkus Back, and a lot of background for those who watch the show. I'm joined by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip-hop artist himself in the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Bring Rawkus back. That's what's been going on.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, same, it's cool. It's been a minute since you put out something. So um it's good going through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot more on the way. This is just the first shot, but I gotta say, I'm excited. I woke up on Friday when the single came out, feeling more excited than I'd ever been really in a long time. And I think the reason why, aside from finally getting the music out, is knowing that people were playing it already, right? Because it dropped on midnight Friday. And so before I went to sleep, I checked the stats. I finally got into Spotify for artists. We talk about how long that took me to get into there. But I finally got into look at the stats. And I saw in the first 10 minutes or so after midnight, it had already amassed about 100 streams on Spotify alone. And I was like, okay, so this thing is actually starting to get out there. Sometimes you have this concern, especially because the last time I really put out music, it was pre-streaming. I mean, it was on streaming, but it was before the streaming era. People were still trying to sell CDs, and it was a different time back then. And so the Spotify plays were kind of like drops in a bucket. And the mentality was, would you get like on average $0.004 per stream? It's like, less than a penny per stream. So what does that really matter? Who's really playing it? You might get a few here and there. You're not going to see anything off of it, whatever. So when I started seeing that the algorithm was picking it up and people were actually playing it, it gave me this feeling of excitement. Like, wow, okay, this thing actually can get out there and can be lucrative, right? And then throughout the day on Friday, the streams picked up and we hit 1,000 streams on day two. So at some point Saturday, we got to 1,000 streams. And that's a really good feeling, right? Just knowing that that song, that music that you spent all that time working on is getting out there. It was played 1,000 times in under 2 days on Spotify alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you start to think of it as, okay, this can be a lucrative business. Who knew, right? For the longest time, it was streaming is so stupid. You like I said, drops in a bucket, right? You're not getting anything off it. A few pennies here and there, maybe. But if you can really get thousands of streams in a couple of days, you start to think, okay, I can grow this. It's doable, right? Not saying that it happens automatically or it's a guarantee, but it's doable. It's something that becomes tangible. Like, okay, I'm already in the in the thousands on day two, right? Technically, so I can get into the millions maybe in a year or whatever, right? It becomes something that you can strive for and start to think of as a real business.
True, 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 true. Yeah, I mean, but it's definitely not easy, but it's definitely like you said, it becomes something you start to see it in. And then of course it's like you get the excitement of it, right? You start
Yeah.
seeing numbers and you're like, yeah, people are listening. Oh yeah,
Right,
and
right. And it's like a
feeling that
little
you want to.
cash register. Because, again, back in the day, we would put out music basically to make money. We had to sell. Now, and we did find ways to make money. We did some shows that paid and we sold a bunch of t-shirts, CDs, and so forth. But you had to make those sales or make those deals to see any money. Now you can log into your Spotify artist page and look at the streams go up in real time. And that is a thrilling sensation, right? Because technically it's more money, and not just more money, but more listeners, right? It's just getting out more. It's being heard more. It's being enjoyed by more people, and you can see it happening. So it's like you just want to keep watching that number go up and try to figure out how to get more eyes or more, really more ears on the product, right?
Right, right. Yeah.
So we can pull it up right now for kicks and see how far it goes up over the course of Nuance to see how fast we're going. Now, I did notice over the weekend it slowed down, and that is to be expected. I've been doing a lot of reading on the algorithm. They say people stream less over the weekend, so I guess that means they stream mostly at work or whatever during the week. So I did experience that. As of yesterday, the streams picked up again, right? So a little slower over the weekend, but I saw a spike starting yesterday and today. I'm looking at it, and it's really cool because it shows you on Spotify for artists how many people are playing it at once. And so to see like, oh, 9 people are streaming this right now. That's, you know, that feels good, because I think the fear is you spend all that time working on music, you put it out, and
Hmm.
nobody plays it, no one hears it, right? Forget about the money for a second. It's the fact that no one's even listening to it. That's really disheartening.
Right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. So
So
it's seeing those numbers move has, a part of validation to it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, and again, it's something to build off of. I think we've had a similar type of conversation on here before about when you grow anything, not just a Spotify music business. When you grow any kind of business, so here we go, number is moving up as we speak. I like this, but when you grow anything, it takes time, and oftentimes it involves an initial investment, right, to put it together. Let's say you're opening up a coffee shop or law
Right.
practice or whatever it is, right? You gotta put money and time into getting it off the ground, and it's an investment, right? Hopefully you can see a return on investment, and I'm starting to see a path for that. Again, not like it's going to be easy or automatic, but if you can get to 1,000 in a day, you can start to see, all right, now the next goal, next threshold is 10,000, right? Then 100,000. You kind of build towards these goals. And these songs can really be looked at as almost analogous to property investments, right? I've heard them described that way
Sure.
before, right? It's
Sure.
like owning a house. The more songs you have, the more investments you have. Some will do better than others, but as time goes on, the value is only going to increase, right? Because your total streams are only going to go up. It's only going to keep generating more, and that's what's really exciting about this too. It's not as though you have to keep pressing up CDs, let's say, to sell more, right?
Right.
Once this is out, it only generates money from there on. Like you're done. You spent the money, right, that you can spend on it. Now, of course, there's advertising. You can do different things with it, but it's an asset that you have now, and it's a
Right.
question of managing it, right? Are you going to manage it? Are you going to try to let it work for you and bring in revenue for you? But it's
Right.
there, and then you can obviously release a lot more, which is the idea here. At least release a lot more songs, and they all become mini investments, right?
Right. And
It's pretty
and
cool.
that's the hope. And that's, kind of how, content, even though it's
Right,
people don't like to refer to music as content, but some of the
right.
companies do. They look at it as content. It's like, yeah, once it's there, same with YouTube videos. You have a YouTube channel, you may have a couple of videos. It's not only that one video you put out, it's every video is getting slow views, which builds up the viewership. And at any point, they could be bringing in money for whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. And in today's world, also with the way TikTok is, and now YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, they're trying to kind of emulate that TikTok type algorithm. It isn't a matter of only pushing your content out to your existing followers, right? We talked about this also, like on TikTok, you can have no followers and have a viral video, because
Right.
the algorithm on the platform tries to find your audience based on what it thinks the video is about and who's going to enjoy consuming it. And so it isn't about just showing it to your followers, right? I was telling my boy this the other day. I was like, like on TikTok, you can post a 15-second clip every single day. And he was like, well, isn't that going to kind of overwhelm your followers? I'm like, but really, the idea is to show it to people who aren't your followers. Now, sure, some people will be seeing it over and over again. That's good too. It's that repetition that you want. But the way it works is it's just being pushed out to a lot of new people. And that's really an exciting opportunity, because if you have a song, let's say, that is now a few months old or a year old or a few years old or whatever, maybe back in the day that would be like, oh, it's an old song, time to move on, throw it in the trash bin, it's done. It's had its day in the sun. Every dog has its day, new song. You still want to put out new songs, yes, but with the algorithm on social media now, that song is not an old song to all of the new people who are seeing that content that you're making
Right.
to push that song every single day, right? So if you, for a year, let's say, promote a series of songs on TikTok, every day new people are going to be seeing and hearing these songs and learning about these songs that hadn't seen them before. And so that's
Right.
really a whole new world, and it opens up all these new opportunities to get yourself out there, right? Yeah, in a way that really didn't exist before. The whole paradigm has changed. And that's part of what's exciting me too. I saw somebody talking about this on YouTube. He was saying, the problem used to be basically growing your followers, right? You're putting something out every day and the same people are watching you over and over again. How do you keep them entertained? How do you grow that following, right? How do you manage that? Now the problem is you're in front of new people every single day, And how do you become a known entity, or how do you establish a brand, given the fact that different people are seeing you every day? He's like, but really, that's a good problem to have. It's really nice to be able to
Better
do that.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah, better problem to
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
Because you're not just like preaching to the choir in that
Right.
regard. Like
Right.
you're talking to different groups, and in those different groups, you may pick up a few people who are going to become, constant followers and
Yeah.
subscribers follow it,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Right. And we were
And
talking about this a little bit yesterday as well. If you have a big group, and again, this isn't even about people purchasing things anymore. All you got to do is get them to just look at what you're doing and maybe stream a song on Spotify or something. You can get to the millions by hard work and grinding that out. But then even if you take 1%, let's say, of that audience, 10,000 people, right? If that 1%, the top 1% of your audience becomes loyal as far as fans go, like they're really into what you do and they really want to support you, you can do things like a Patreon type thing or some kind of system, like membership system, where all of those 10,000 people, let's say they pay $10 a month, that's $100,000 a month you can generate off of just 1% of the total audience, right?
right.
So that's another big opportunity right there. I mean, there really are opportunities to monetize this, and that's exciting to me. And then for the first time, I'm really starting to look at music as a business. As funny as that sounds, back in the day, and you could speak on what your experience was, but when we were putting stuff out a long time ago, I kind of had like a vague idea of music as a business. It was like, let's press some stuff up, let's spend some money putting the stuff out and try to sell some CDs, try to move some t-shirts, try to do some shows. But there really wasn't any concrete plan as far as, all right, how are you going to make your return on investment? What are the numbers going to look like? How are
Right.
you operating deliberately as a business? That wasn't
Right.
really part of it for me, at least. It wasn't in my calculus. It was too vague. Maybe I was too young and inexperienced in business and in life in general, but that wasn't ever really part of how I moved, right? It was almost like secondary. Like, yeah, like I want to do this music stuff and I want to get myself out there and I want to sell some things along the way. Now I'm starting to look at it in terms of how much money, how much revenue can I generate over time doing this, and how can I get a return on my investments and really move like you would in any other business, right? Like a law practice, for example. I'm starting to think of it that way, and that's an exciting opportunity for me now too.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. I think, it was more about I think it was less about thinking about the business, being in it as a business in those terms. Like,
Yeah,
of course, we did things like making sure, like, the copyright stuff and
right.
the
Publishing,
publishing stuff was straight. We understood that time. But as far as thinking about this is going to be, how do we get that, like you said, return on investment, this is that time. Wasn't a lot of that. It was still a lot of promotion. It was still a lot of being a part of the scene, being
right,
out there, and that type of
right,
thing, you
right.
know.
Yeah, exactly. And I watch some people that give me inspiration because I really didn't know how to maneuver in this new world, right, of streaming and sales no longer being a thing. I wasn't even thinking that when I was making the music. To be honest, I wasn't thinking about algorithms when I was making the music. I said to myself, I'm going to look at this later. Right now, let me just make the best product I can make, right?
Right.
And then let me start looking into promo. So when I started doing that, I started finding these artists who were doing massive numbers and looking into what they were doing, what works, how do they use the algorithms to their benefit, right? And you start to do all the studying. And what I found was they often don't really care about being in a scene. Now, maybe there isn't as much of a scene as there once was, right? Because we
Right.
talked about, for example, here in New York City, every day of the week was a hip hop show. Homeboy Sandman would be there. You can go to a hip hop show and either get on the mic or network, give out your stuff. I mean, just be part of that. Same way like a stand up comedian would do, right? You got to be part of the scene. Since everything moved online, you don't have the scene in the way that you used to have it. And so a lot
Right.
of these artists now who are doing these big numbers on Spotify and on social media, they don't care to be part of any scene. They'll tell you, I don't care about doing shows. I don't care about being interviewed. I don't care about being on the radio. I don't care about doing podcasts. I don't care about any of that stuff. Awards, Grammys, it doesn't matter. All they want to do is get streams on Spotify and maybe Apple Music, maybe YouTube or whatever, and figure out how to make money off of it. And some people might look at that like, oh, it's just selling out. You're just about the business. But to me, it almost simplifies the game in an appealing way because it takes a lot of pressure. It's kind of weird to think about it like this, but it takes a lot of that other pressure out because you're not worried so much about the other stuff. You're just worried about how do I make my return on the investment eventually, right? How do I grow? How do I grow these numbers to the point where I can generate revenue off of this? And it's just a business. It's not about the accolades. It's about doing your numbers. Again, some people might think that that's corny or whack or not hip hop or not about whatever, but I kind of respect that in a sense that it kind of simplifies things and it allows you to hyper focus on that goal. You're not so distracted by these other missions and objectives, you know?
Yeah, kinda. I think that there's definitely something missing about that of being, being part of the scene, networking with others, being there hands-on with the people that come to the shows, to the people that perform the shows, the people that set up things, or just even being in that world, period. Um, I think there's definitely benefits to that. Like you said, these days, at least like the New York scene is not the same as it was then.
Right.
And even if there is, even if it is, because there's still people who do that, there are also people who are able to sit at home and, never touch a stage
Right.
and never meet a fan or a follower and just pump out music from their home and
Yeah.
do that. We talked about before, Connor Price.
Yeah.
He's well known on TikTok. He's
Right.
probably got over 1 million followers. He's got a couple million followers,
Yeah. I
I
think I
think.
think I looked up recently. I think he has 9 million monthly listeners.
But I mean followers like on TikTok or something
Right.
like
Right.
that.
Right. Right. Well, Nick D.
And
I think Nick D has 4 million on TikTok.
and he never touched a stage
Right.
until
Recently.
recently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this was like his first shows. And he's been constantly pumping out
Right.
his music
Right.
and content through his social media and built up an audience
Yeah.
of 1 million plus followers. Like you said, 9 million monthly streams and never had touched the stage.
9 million monthly listeners. He probably has more like a million plus streams a day.
So that's
Yeah.
yeah. So
That's
that's
real.
another avenue that's possible.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know. And I agree with you. The purist in me is disappointed that we don't have the scenes as we used to. And yeah, the idea of you making it, especially in hip hop, without ever touching a stage, a live mic, does seem kind of corny, right? To a purist, right? From that perspective, yeah. But I do respect the hustle. It's a different kind of hustle,
I
but
but it I like
it's
that the possibilities are there.
it opens up new possibilities. Like there are people like Nick is one of them. Nick D, he has a farm in Virginia, and he basically never leaves the farm. Right? He
Right.
has internet access. He can upload his music to Spotify and whatever, and just go from there. TikTok, he does his thing.
Right.
So that's great. It's different. It's a new world. I'm looking
Right.
at it for what it is, and I guess my perspective, looking on the bright side of all this, is it just cuts out a lot of that noise. Because I know in the past, if I was putting out a single, I would be so distracted by, all right, I got to do all these live shows. I got to do all these interviews, all these appearances. I got to try to get in these magazines. I got to try. And it would be to the point where actually monetizing it would be well down the list of priorities because you're cutting yourself so thin. You worry about all these different things, and then you start telling yourself, "Well, maybe this interview I'm going to do isn't going to sell me any singles directly, but it's exposure, it's an opportunity, and maybe that will lead to something. Maybe they'll play it on the station a bunch of times, and then someone will buy a ticket to a show one day and then see me and buy a T-shirt at the show. You start like going through these hypotheticals in your head about how these things might play out. And, maybe there is some benefit to that kind of all of the above strategy. Not saying you don't do anything anymore, but this idea of how do I think like a business? If I'm getting revenue from the streams, as like if that's what I'm going for, then I need to move deliberately in that direction. So if I'm going to be putting out content, the goal of that content is how do I convert this into streams? As opposed to
Right.
some vague idea of like just throwing it against the wall and seeing what sticks. Now you're more focused, and so that part of it is something that I'm excited about, right? Because it's an opportunity now to really direct your energy directly into one thing, and not just one thing, but you can just be more focused and deliberate in your moves.
Right. And the thing is, those things that you mentioned, like the interviews and the shows, and
Yeah,
and doing drops and all this and that. Like those were the path. That was the path to monetization because otherwise you'd be sitting there with a stack of CDs and no one to sell them to because they'd never heard of you,
Right,
right? If you do an
right,
interview, it's that's your way of being exposed to a different audience. That's also the way of giving social proof because if you're being interviewed, you're obviously someone worth being interviewed, so the person should pay attention to it. Right. And so these were the path to monetizing things. That was the natural way of doing it.
right.
Now
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not completely necessary because there's possibilities via social media that could
Right,
be done.
right. So in that sense, it's actually easier, or at least the game plan is more defined, right? It isn't like there's like just like scattered idea of I don't know, because when you have all these different things that could lead to something, maybe you're really just kind of like trying stuff out and basically trying everything, and then you don't really know what's going to work or the direct
Right.
result of your efforts, right? It's like let me just try to get myself out there wherever I can, and we'll see what happens. Now at least you kind of have better data, better stats to go off of, right? It's more direct. You can, let's say you put an ad out and you try to convert it to streams, and you can look at how many streams did this ad convert, and then you can make changes based on how it's performing and look at your
Right.
demographics and look at all these different things. We didn't have access to any of that data before. Everything was just so vague, and it's just
Right.
like a guessing game pretty much. Now everything becomes a lot more tangible, and that appeals to my mathematical side, maybe my scientific side, maybe right, aside from the artistic side. I'm looking at it now from a numbers perspective,
Right.
and I can see how these numbers work and how you can treat this as a business, right?
Right.
And
That was more
there's a
like
blueprint now.
exposure. That was more
Yeah,
like exposure marketing. You're constantly pushing in the awareness stage of what they call in marketing funnels in the awareness stage,
right.
where you're trying to just generate that awareness. You're trying to just get it out there more and more. These days, you can actually use data to be able to try to target different
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you've got the algorithms that, in some part, help a little bit, hurt a little bit, but it just opens a different avenue. So it's
Right, right. So I did mention we were going to look at the numbers here. When we came on, we were at, I believe, 2209. Spotify streams on Bring Rawkus Back. So we're going to see where we land at the end of the show here.
all right, all right.
Um, Now, have you looked at Apple Music? Because they didn't
Yes.
let me in. Apple Music let me in. Spotify took me a long time. I mentioned this, but they didn't believe that I was Paisan, the hip hop artist. When you try to get control over your account, they say, all right, well, send us your social media channels. And they want to see like, your email address that you're emailing them from listed somewhere on that social media channel or whatever. But
Right.
my social media channels were not set up to promote my music at the time. So they were seeing a lawyer, they were seeing a political figure, they were seeing Mike Scala. And I would be like, my Twitter is Mike G Scala. And they go there and they'd be like, that's not Paisan, that's Mike Scala. Like, look, we have Paisan's music sitting here on Spotify.
Right, right,
You're
right.
showing me some lawyer guy. Like, that's not the rapper. And it's like they didn't make the connection that it could possibly, because I'm sure they're not used to seeing that kind of thing. So it took a while. I forget how I got it. It took for the better part of a year of going back and forth with them to convince them that it was me and that I'm the same guy. And so I finally got access to that. I'm happy about that because these tools are great. Apple Music, right away. In fact, Pandora, I went back and forth with them a little bit, but they were just basically like, well, show us an artist social media channel with that email address. And I showed them the YouTube and I put it on there and they were okay with that. So they let me in. But Apple Music right away, right? No questions asked. They were satisfied.
Mm.
Have you seen the recent tool on Apple Music? I think maybe it was last year they rolled this out, where they'll show you all of the radio stations that are playing your song.
Radio stations, the
Yeah,
online stations.
no, they collect data of radio stations around the world that are playing that song.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah,
To be honest, I haven't looked at a lot of the Apple Music stats lately. I was looking at some of the Spotify stuff because I think we talked about it earlier this year, actually. Maybe not on here, but there was a different there was something kind of spike in the stats, and so I was doing a lot of comparing with all of the different stats, and it showed how, they went up over the past year and this and that. So I was doing a lot of digging into the Spotify stuff and haven't looked much into the Apple Music thing.
Yeah, so this apparently is a new feature over the past year or so, and it showed, for example, the Trim Mix Party. It didn't say Trim Mix Party, but it said 90.1 FM. I think
Right.
Stony Forum, New York, they called it. And I knew that that was a station that had played the song, right? I heard that one, but then it showed other stuff that I wasn't aware of, right? It had something called B-Box in Brooklyn, Dumbo, Brooklyn, and I looked it
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
They played it twice. So you're familiar with this?
Yeah.
I kind of remember going to a radio station in Dumbo with you to be interviewed once. It might be the same place. I didn't know if it was called B-Box or whatever. Was
Are
that
you
the same
thinking
place?
are you thinking JY?
No, 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 no. JY was a different part of Brooklyn. This was actually Dumbo. This was
Okay.
in that same spot. It was a storefront in Dumbo. They had stickers. All I don't know if you remember this in the studio. They had stickers of artists all on the wall. There was a Kosher Dill sticker there. You had been up in there, and
Okay.
you
Okay.
know, a lot of different artists in hip hop. But we went to be interviewed. I forget the name of it. If that was called B-Box or not, but it was certainly in that same area.
All right.
And so
But
they
one
played
of
the song
the that's
twice
one of the
already.
places. Huh?
They played the song twice already. I had no idea.
Yeah, that was one of the places I sent it off to.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so I had no idea they had played the song. Now I'm going to try to find the broadcast of that show to hear it. But it's cool because this is Apple Music. This is not a spin through Apple, but Apple is aggregating that data. When the radio station
Right.
wants it, Apple is getting it. And then I started looking at some of my older songs, which aren't even out anymore. Like Homegirls got played many times in Germany on the radio.
Nice.
Yeah. And I did get a check once, by the way. This was years ago. I got a check because I think the Give It Up remix that we did was
Wow.
used on a Disney show in the Czech Republic or something like that. And I got a royalty for that. It was so
Really?
random. Yeah, it was so weird and random, but I got a statement and some money out of it. I'm like, okay. I don't know how that worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? As long as it's doing it,
Yeah.
it's all good.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, all right, let's talk about the songs. I need micro content. I need TikTok content. And I want to talk about the song Bring Rawkus Back featuring Cool G Rap. We talked previously about how that came about with G Rap, but we can go more into the content of the song now that it's out because obviously the concept Bring Rawkus Back and the hook says Bring Rawkus Back, but when I made it, I wasn't thinking necessarily let's bring the label back literally, right? It's more
Right.
about the spirit of what that represented. And I think the song then tries to establish what the spirit of Rawkus was. I start off my verse by saying, Rawkus meant death to the shiny suit era. Now, it's funny because when Cut Supreme debuted that on the Trim Mix Party, he cut up that line about 12, 15 times. It reminded me of that song that you got where you're like, that right there was a line for New York DJs to overplay like 1,000 times, right?
Right.
He was doing that over and over again. I might put that up on TikTok too, like just him cutting up that part. But you know, Rawkus meant death to the shiny suit era. Rawkus meant death. Rawkus meant death to the shiny suit era over and over and over again, because that meant something. And it sounds
Right.
funny now. It sounds quaint now, maybe because of what happened post Rawkus, right? We don't have these distinct lines between mainstream and underground hip hop anymore, but we did back in the day. We really
Right.
did, right? And of course, a lot of things are the reasons. Streaming and the internet plays a big role in that. But there used to be a thing like we were somewhere. I forget who it was. I think it was one of your friends. We were hanging out with someone at a club once, and the person said to me, "Are you into mainstream?" And she said it in a very derisive kind of way. You're into mainstream. I think because we were at a club and they were playing some mainstream music, I was kind of vibing with it. And she was like, "You're into mainstream, like that makes you lame for like mainstream hip hop, right?" Because
How dare you?
it was almost like you had to choose sides. You had to be either mainstream or underground at the time. It was weird in that way, right? If you laugh at that now, you roll your eyes at that now, but that was kind of the culture. And then you had
Very common.
yeah, they called that the backpackers, right?
Oh,
Where
yeah, yeah. It was very
yeah,
common.
the first time I actually encountered this, I was in high school. It's probably like '98, and they would talk about that May song, 24 Hours to Live, right? And a lot of the kids in the high school class said that that was a good song. They were feeling it. It was on the radio. They're like, yeah, I like that song. And there's one kid, and he had like the tight backpack on. He was definitely a backpacker. I didn't know what was going on at the time, right? He was just kind of a weird kid to me at the time because he was like, "You like that song?" And he's like, "I like the beat, but those raps, nah." And I'm thinking, what? Why? Like, I didn't understand where he was coming from, right? But of course, you learn like he was into underground hip hop, and he thought that anything on Bad Boy, anything that was major label, was corny, right?
Right.
So
There was a very, very strong division
yeah, yeah,
at that time. And to be honest, you know, I think we all fell into it to some degree in different levels of varying levels of degree. Like there were certain people that was like, yeah, he's on the radio. We don't listen to that. And it
yeah,
wasn't anything new, really. Like if you go further back,
right.
a lot of the criticism against MC Hammer, for example, was because he was too pop. He was too mainstream. He was
Well,
too,
yeah, yeah.
you
You can
know.
see back even before that. You can go all the way back to Rapper's Delight.
There was a yeah, that was a big thing in hip hop
Yeah,
to not be mainstream, right?
right.
Um, I don't go pop or
Yeah, yeah.
don't do radio friendly. Like it was, and part of it was being anti-establishment. Part of it was also
Counterculture.
because, yeah, counterculture, but also part of it was because um, the mainstream radio or even the industry wasn't messing with hip hop from the beginning.
Right,
That's just a fad. It's not real music. It's
right,
not going to be around. That's
right.
nothing. And so it was shunning them, and hip hop was like, yeah, okay, whatever. We don't care
Yeah,
anyway because this is
yeah,
for us.
yeah,
And then later it started to grow, and then radio and the mainstream industry, the record industry was like, oh, well, there's money here. Hey, how you guys doing over there?
yeah, yeah. Nas actually pointed out, I think it was in his master class, he pointed out that hip hop had to start putting R&B in the songs on the hooks or whatever to try to trick radio into playing it because they didn't want to play rap songs or hip hop songs on the radio. So you put an R&B singer on there. Now maybe it's more palatable to them. Now maybe they'll play it. But then you had
Right,
people who were more, keep it real, thinking that was selling out. Like that's not what we're trying to do. That's not really the essence
right,
of what hip hop is. You're just doing that to get radio play.
right,
So that's why you had that divide.
right.
And
I think EMD had a song aimed at that. I can't remember. Not EMD, EPMD.
PMD, yeah, yeah,
There was some, I can't think of the name of it right now, but something in that regard.
right, right. And so the shiny suit era really was exemplified by Bad Boy, right? And
Yes, because from
we
that
watched the
video where
videos.
Puff and Mace had the shiny suits.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, multiple videos, right? That was kind of their trademark. So
Yes. EPMD crossover. That was the name of
also,
it.
yep, that's right. So Rawkus emerged in the late 90s as an alternative to that. But here's the thing. Why Rawkus? Why not all underground music, right? We just said there was a divide between mainstream and underground rap. The thing about Rawkus was it came in with funding, major funding. And so really it was an underground indie label, but it was kind of on the level of a major label. It even had major label distribution at various points. So that was another thing, right? You go to the stores, you go to any record store, CDs like Tower Records, right? Or what was the other one? I think the Wall was one of them. You had like these stores you would go to buy music. Remember those? Uh, they would have all.
You said that like it was just like I don't know, like dinosaur stuff. Do you remember those? Like stores where you could buy music
Yeah,
at.
it kind of is now, right? It kind of is like a relic of the last century, last
Stores
millennium.
where you could buy music. Do you remember those? Like, oh
Yeah,
my
what were they
God.
called? Tower Records was a big one. The Wall. Remember any other names?
Sam Goody was
Sam
one.
Goody. Yeah, like
Yeah, Sam
yeah,
Goody
some
was
of they
one.
got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
then
Goody
you
good.
go to like to your Target or Best Buy or
Walmart was
or
big.
whatever, and they would have like
Power is still out here.
Tower.
Tower Records.
Oh, Tower Records. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So kind of like I guess the predecessor to Barnes and Noble, right? Because now people go to the bookstore, but back then everyone would go to the record store all the time. So
Yeah, there was a lot.
yeah, so if you went to those stores, you really would see mostly major label music. Now some had a little indie section, especially if it was like a local artist, or you had some stuff here and there. depending on the distribution. But it was
Someone
more
in the chat said coconuts.
okay. Yeah, there. Yes, that's
I don't
funny.
know that name. That must have been a New York
I've
thing.
heard of that. I'm going back a long way. So that was also why you had that divide when you went to the store to buy music, right?
Wasn't available. What you
It wasn't
listened
really
to.
available. So you had to be
Radio.
no right. It wasn't on radio. It wasn't in the record stores. It wasn't on MTV. The internet really was in its infancy. It wasn't really like it is now. So
Right.
it was like a secret society. You had to be. Most people didn't even know it existed. Most people
Right.
thought the only music out there was the major stuff, right?
Right.
This was able to compete a little bit with that because it did have that funding, that funding and that money behind it. So you would find Rawkus releases in the Tower Records and the Coconuts and whatever else. That was a bit of a game changer because it took that underground sound and made it more mainstream by virtue of the budget that I had behind it. And the reason why I had a budget was it was actually started by the son of Rupert Murdoch, of all people. James Murdoch went to college with these two other guys and they started this label together, but it came from Murdoch's money. And at one point, I think Rupert even bought the label. It was his money. His money started Rawkus Records. And if you saw, I know you don't watch Succession, right? But
I don't even know what that is.
the HBO show, Succession, very popular show.
No,
If,
no.
yeah. If you watch that show, for those who have seen the show, the character of Kendall, right? He's one of the sons of the guy who owns the whole empire. He's Logan's son. He's depicted on the show as being very into hip hop. He's got a famous scene where he raps a song. He goes to L to the OG, right? Tribute to his dad. And I think even the very first scene of the series, I think, shows him in the limousine. I think he's rapping along to the Beastie Boys or something like that. But throughout the series, he's depicted as a hip hop head. Well, that comes from James Murdoch, right? It's loosely based on the Murdoch family. The old man on the show, loosely based on Rupert Murdoch. He's got a whole news empire, like a Fox News type thing. It's not exact, but it's like very much inspired by that family. That's why you get Kendall on the show being into hip hop because he is inspired by James Murdoch, the founder of Rawkus Records, right? So that's where that comes in. And like I said, you do start to get more mainstream attention on this. It does start to break radio. I was in high school and I heard of Mos Def for the first time, 99, right? What was that song that single that came out? Miss Fat Booty, right?
Miss Fat Booty, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even know who he was. And I saw someone had a CD of songs that were hot and it was on the CD. And it was like, and I was like, Mos Def, what is that? I never heard of it before, but it was on there. You would see that alongside other major artists at the time, right? Like he was getting in the mix because of that Rawkus push. And some of these records were selling, right? The Big L posthumous album, when he died, Rawkus put out his album. That record went gold on Rawkus, right? The gold records. Back in the day, gold and platinum meant you were selling. That was 500,000 units. That was 1,000,000 units, right? That was something that underground artists didn't do. It was happening on Rawkus. Rawkus was so it was taking this underground scene and bringing it more to the masses, bringing it in front of more people. And it kind of existed in the sweet space. I say it on the record. I said the mainstream's underground, a scenic view from that sweet spot that lived right between the two, because it wasn't overtly mainstream, right? We talked about the sound of it being really anti that. It was an alternative to that. But it wasn't so obscure you couldn't listen to it, because that was the other thing also. Now technology is cheap, relatively speaking. And so you can record great quality stuff and mix and put it out and everything, and it'll sound as good as anything else. Back then, it was like, man, if you wanted polished sounding music, the idea was you needed to be in $1 million studio. You got to be on a major label. If you're doing this yourself, it's going to sound DIY. It's going to sound less polished, right? Because the technology didn't compete back then. And so oftentimes when you heard underground music, I mean, some people took pride in it and liked it, said they liked it or whatever, but you could hear the difference. You could hear it. It sounded underground. It sounded indie. It sounded do it yourself. It didn't sound as polished as the major label stuff with a budget behind it. Rawkus flipped that on its head because it did have some money behind it. And so you had rappers who were performing more underground style music, but doing it in a more polished way. It sounded just as good as everything else on the radio. Miss Fat Boy,
Right.
Miss Def single, Tyler Quality, Get By, right? These songs that came out, they
Yeah.
sounded just as good as all the major label stuff, all the mainstream commercial stuff that was out there. But
Hmm.
the rapping was more advanced, it was more lyrical, maybe it had more soul to it, it had that underground aesthetic to it, but it was also palatable to the masses. It didn't sound like something you could only like if you were like a real hardcore hip hop nerd. And so it was to me that sweet spot, right? And I really, really fell in love with it for that reason, because I did like the aesthetics of the more mainstream songs. I like the danceability of Bad Boy Records and how
Hmm.
fun they could be and how polished they sounded, right? The audio of it, I enjoyed that aspect of it. But I also loved the lyricism and the artistry that you found more in the underground stuff. Rawkus was kind of the marriage between them. It was to me,
Right.
that's why I loved it so much, right? It was like, we're going to make an underground song, but make it sound good for the radio, or make
Right.
it look like it belongs on MTV, but it's still underground and it's still lyrical and it's still appealing to the backpackers. But it's not like so obscure and esoteric that no one really beyond that can get into it. You know what I mean? Like that was where I wanted to be. That's where I wanted to sit. Like I love that. That was my lane. You know what I mean?
Right.
That
Right.
was perfect for me.
Yeah.
So that's what Rawkus really represented. And in 2007, they did the Rawkus 50, where they were trying to
Aesthetic.
say it again.
I know. I was saying you want to bring back that type of aesthetic, not
Yes,
specifically the label. It's just like that, you know.
right. Bring that lyricism, bring that artistry in. And again, don't just rap for the sake of rapping. We had that discussion on here previously also, where some artists will get praised by hip hop heads for being great at rapping, but they never move beyond that lane because that's all they really do is just rap. But what about rapping well in the context of great songs, great songwriting, combining the two? That's a
Right.
skill set that many people aren't able to do, right? You look at battle rap, the stereotype, not always true, but the stereotype when you watch battle rap is battle rappers can't make music. They always say that. What if you can? What if you can spit a hot 16, right? Make the backpackers, make the hip hop heads love you, but also do that in the context of a great song that people who aren't just hardcore hip hop heads can enjoy.
Right.
Not easy to marry those two, but if you can do that, to me, that's the best of both worlds. Like that's where it's at. So Rawkus 50 was the label's attempt to start to tap into the changing era, because we were moving to the digital era. We were moving towards streaming. We weren't quite there yet, but Spotify began in 2006, I believe. This was 2007. They were trying to figure out what to do. MySpace was big at the time. So how do you take advantage of this? Because they were seeing across the board in the music industry a decline in record sales. So
Right.
that big question, right? The whole industry struggled with it. The whole world struggled with this for a long time. What do you do? How do you monetize it now? How do you stay in business? How do you generate revenue? Right? What do you do? So this was their attempt to look
Mhm.
at artists who had fan bases on MySpace and they were doing the thing online, and put their music out digitally under the Rawkus banner. And so I think the timing of it worked out great for me because I had just released an album independently the year before, really a few months before this all was
Mhm.
going down, and had built up a big following on MySpace, right? I had like what 50,000 friends in there, and it was carefully curated. So these were hip hop heads who liked or who I thought would like my music. I was adding them to my page all the time. So I was constantly in the charts of, Queens, Rosedale, whatever it is, like your zip code. I was always like number one in my area because I had that big online presence and I had just released the album. So I think Rawkus wanted to tap into that. And also the shows that we were doing throughout the city, right? We had a presence also in the scene, like we talked about, it wasn't just online, it was also in the scene. So all of
Right.
that combined, I think, led to that deal that I was able to sign with them in 2007, where they re-released my music online, digitally. Now,
Right.
of course, to me, that's the ultimate dream, right? Some people I know turned down the offer because they had questions or concerns about some of the terms. In fact, I think I found that contract a while back, but on Nuance, I think we looked at it. If you recall, I recently, I refound the contract, and it really wasn't a bad contract, but it was again a changing world. So some people were,
Right.
like asking questions. So what do you mean you're going to get my, rights, my digital distribution rights? What does that mean for me? And, like I
Right.
own my masters, but you own these rights. And what does that, so some people didn't like some of that. But my thinking at the time was, and again, maybe in part because I wasn't thinking deliberately as a businessman. I was thinking more in terms of the opportunities I'm being presented and how I can take advantage of the opportunities. My thinking was this was going to be a springboard, or this was going to be a stamp of approval, like you said, social proof. You mentioned that before, social proof.
Social proof. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so to me, I wasn't expecting to sign a deal with Rawkus and make a ton of money directly from it immediately. My whole idea, and I think this was the right way of thinking. I was young at the time, but I think I got this one right because I don't regret this at all. My thinking was I was going to take the deal, and that was going to be part of my brand, and I was going to use that to get me into rooms I might not have otherwise been able to get into. And that
Right.
definitely worked, by the way, because once I had that Rawkus stamp of approval, you're trying to stand out amongst 50,000, 100,000 rappers trying to do things out here, right? So when you can go in and you say, well, I got to deal with Rawkus, that meant something. That meant any hip hop show going on around the country, probably around the world, you can get on. If you go to them and be like, listen, I'm Pi. I just signed this Rawkus deal. What's up? Chances are they'll let you on stage and rock a few songs and do a set or whatever. Right? It just lets you in any door where hip hop is happening. You were there. It was credibility. That's really what it boiled down to. It gave you that ultimate credibility. So I certainly used it to my benefit in that regard, and I'm glad that I did. I talked about on this song, I did this, I collaborated with Cool G Rap. He was an artist who was on Rawkus also. And
Right.
that's why I wanted him on the song. We talked about that on a prior episode. I had already recorded the song, saw he was doing work with Domingo, hit Domingo up, and he put me in touch with G Rap. And he had suggested years prior that I work with him. So it all kind of came full circle. It's just perfect opportunity, right? I did a song paying tribute to Rawkus Records, this label that I myself was such a big fan of and had the opportunity to sign to. And G-Rap, one of the best rappers of all time, one of the GOATs, the Don, right? Probably the innovator. He and Rakim, probably the two main innovators of multi-syllabic rhyming in hip hop. So you can go down the list. Everyone from Biggie to Eminem to Nas say that they're directly influenced by Cool G Rap, right? Jay-Z, hearing me rap is like hearing G Rap in his prime, right? It goes on and on. I even told G Rap this because he mentioned he was doing some stuff for the Hip Hop 50, right? 50th anniversary of hip hop last year. He was saying that he was just on stage doing some appearances. And I said, yeah, I saw you on one of them with Nas. And I said, I really hope Nas puts you on his next project after shouting you out on all three of his magics. Nas just dropped Magic 1, Magic 2, Magic 3. On all of those albums, there's a shout out to Cool G Rap. So, I was like, hey, I hope he's been doing collabs with, 50 Cent and a bunch of people, Lil Wayne. I was like, well, he should throw Cool G Rap a feature considering that he's been shouting him out on every album. So, really fortunate that I was able to do that with really one of my lyrical heroes, right? One of my hip hop heroes, and get a song. And the idea is, but here's kind of an ironic thing, inspired a little bit by Bad Boy, in that I'm telling the story, right? My song, and again, it was really done prior to me even being on it. So it's like a full story that I'm telling before he even says a word. And that could have been the end of the song, but then he does a verse. The idea is he's delivering some of that flavor that I'm referencing on the song. So I'm saying, this is what Rawkus meant. This is what Rawkus did. This is how the whole game changed as a result. And Cool G Rap now is going to come on and spit a hot 16 in the vein of what I'm talking about. So I say inspired by Bad Boy because I would hear songs like Biggie would do guest verses on R&B songs, like a Total song or something like that. And his verse would seemingly have nothing to do with the rest of the song, but it was just him delivering that flavor to the song. It was just him giving that extra element, right? That extra spice on top of it. Also, and this brings me to another topic here, Kanye West. One of my favorite Kanye songs is Devil in a New Dress. He's got Rick Ross on there. You know that song? It's on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. It's kind of similar in structure in that he does a song that his is about a woman, but he's got a whole song that he does about a woman, it's about a breakup or whatever. And then it's an instrumental breakdown. And then Rick Ross comes in and he just raps a verse about nothing to do with what Kanye was talking about. But it's just a hot verse that he spits. And I liked it, right? I mean, maybe in my younger days, I would have been like, man, this bothers me. Like, maybe it would have triggered my OCD-ness or something. I'd be like, this isn't about what the rest of the song is about. But
Right.
I've been able to appreciate that as of late more, right? Like I said, that's one of my favorite Kanye songs. And so inspired by that. I mean, maybe Kanye was inspired by Bad Boy himself when he did that. I don't know. But I was inspired by all that. And so that's what I wanted. I didn't want Cool G Rap to do a verse talking about Rawkus Records. I covered that topic already. I didn't want Cool G Rap to be like, and by the way, Rawkus also, no. I told the story about Rawkus Records. I ended off that story. I put a period on it. I want you to come in and show me Rawkus Records, right? Don't tell me about Rawkus. Show me Rawkus, right? And so what he's talking about shouldn't be what I'm talking about. It's really more an exhibition of what I'm talking about. So I like that, right? That was done very deliberately, and I'm happy that happened that way. And he was very accommodating in giving me what I wanted too, which was cool, right? Even when it was time for the drop, he was like, is that good for you? Do you like that? Is that what you're looking for? And I'm like, man, like, you're the legend. You're one of the best rappers of all time. How am I going to tell you no? You know what I mean? But he was approaching it like we're just two artists collaborating on a song, trying to get the best result. That was really cool.
Right.
So, yeah. So, all right. Any thoughts before we move on to the Kanye point?
No, I think that's, that covers it pretty well. I mean, for what Rawkus meant at the time and the legacy that they left, and also, how you went about the song. Yeah, it's I think it's really on point there. And I'm wondering, how much of that we're missing these days. Like, because there is this blend of kind of those two worlds to some, so to speak, which is a good thing. All right, so it doesn't have to be so defined. Although there, yeah, because you've got your Lil Wayne influence type, you've got your mumble rap type, but then you've also got your J. Cole's and your um Kendricks
That's
and
true. That's true.
Chances and people that are spitting.
Right. That's
So
that maybe that's been a resurgence as of really the past few months even. I
it's
mean,
been the last couple years, I'd say.
resurgence of it. I mean, I was actually encouraged, this is a bit of a tangent, but if you watch the Democratic convention and they would play Not Like Us a lot, right? As we said, it's a song of the summer, whatever. But forget about that it's a beef track, song, whatever. Putting that aside, just the fact that it's somebody spitting again, and
Right,
that's so relevant now, right? It isn't like again banished to the depths of the underground. Like, no, this is the most relevant song of the summer of the year, probably, and it's not one of those other kinds of rappers who became popular recently. It's someone who actually is spitting. I mean, in a way, that's bringing Rawkus back.
right,
You know,
right. So
right?
yeah, I
Spitting in
mean,
the context of a widely spread and heard song, right? Not spitting in your mom's basement. So that's really what Rawkus is.
right,
So,
right.
so getting to the Kanye point of it, because I do reference Kanye on the song, and we can have a discussion or a debate as to what role Kanye played directly in this changing, or how much of it was him benefiting from circumstance. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. I think he did a really good job at recognizing the changing winds and monetize and capitalize off of that in a way that really did create a shift in the industry. But again, piggybacking off of something that was happening organically. So if you watch the Kanye documentary, which is still on Netflix, right, called Genius, you saw in real time he was trying to get signed to Rawkus, right, because he was a producer and he had produced for Kweli in particular. And Kweli took him on tour with him, and his whole thing was, yeah, he's producing, he'd already produced for Jay-Z and whatever, but he really loved that Rawkus aesthetic. He contributed a lot to it, right, because he was providing these soul backdrops for these raps, right? Quali was really spitting like an underground rapper, but on top of these soulful commercial beats that Jay-Z might be using, right? So Kanye really at the time was bridging that gap between the underground and the mainstream via his production. He wants to get on as a rapper. Everyone knows his whole thing was, yeah, I'm producing, but I want to be a rapper too. Really want to be known more
Right.
as a rapper than a producer. That was his whole thing. And people didn't take him seriously at first because of his aesthetic. The mainstream, he was trying to do it in the mainstream, but the mainstream look and style was not what Kanye was up until that point, right? It was more like Jay-Z or Biggie, and you had to have like more like a tough guy image or persona. And you
Right.
know, it was Kanye was like, I'm like the everyman backpacker guy, but I'm gonna do it with soul beats and do it on the radio. And people were like, I don't know. I mean, it was almost like he was trying to make himself Rawkus, but to a higher degree. I think Rawkus might have turned him down because they didn't think that he was polished enough as a lyricist yet, but he probably could have gotten there. I think he would have gotten there, but he was trying to do Rawkus style music, I think, on an even bigger level. Because he was saying, and it didn't even make sense to me at the time. I was watching some of this as it was happening, and he was saying things like, I'm going to be bigger than Michael Jackson. But you have to put it in a context, like maybe now it doesn't sound so crazy. Back then when he was saying that in like 2001, 2002, you're like, who is this kid? Yeah, he's got beats, but he's really a backpacker. And the way he's rapping is like a backpacker. He's rapping like a wannabe Rawkus rapper. No disrespect, but he was literally trying to get onto Rawkus, and his lyricism wasn't as evolved yet. His rapping wasn't quite there yet. So what on earth gives him the idea that he's going to be the next Michael Jackson? It doesn't make any sense, right? Like
Right.
what he was and what he represented. He was trying to do Rawkus on a level like 1,000 times bigger than Rawkus. And we were all saying, we can't believe you can go gold on Rawkus. This is great. You're doing underground music, but you're going gold. He's like, basically, at the time, I'm going to do underground music, but I'm going to go diamond. We were like, yeah, all right, dream on, kid. Right? That was basically what it was. And he was able to bridge the gap. Probably Rawkus passing on him was the best thing that ever happened to him, because he went on to get signed to Rockefeller and got that Def Jam budget. And that's a different scenario. We did talk about Rawkus having major label money behind it. It wasn't the Def Jam budget. This is really major label stuff.
Can you
So
imagine if he would have if they would have taken him on Rawkus and he would release that first album through Rawkus?
right, I don't think they
That
would have
label
had
would probably still exist if he got that same success off of that first album.
yeah, but I don't think it would have been possible because I don't think he would have had the proper marketing behind it to push it the way that Def Jam was able to.
Mm.
I don't think it would have done the same. So the fact that he was able to do that on Rockefeller, but you're right, these are the songs that he had recorded prior. It wasn't like he got signed to Rockefeller Def Jam and then started making all those songs. He was pitching those songs to Rawkus. So the Rawkus album would have been very similar to that album that did come out, The College Dropout,
Mm.
right? These were his songs that he already had. He had Jesus Walks. He had All Falls Down in a different version. And he had all this. In fact, he even had some of the songs that went on to his later albums, like Homecoming and the song about your mama. What was that? You know what I'm talking about? It was like Hey Mama.
Right.
That stuff he had even back then too. This is like on his second and third album. He had those songs done before he even got signed. So the fact that he was able to do that on Rockefeller, and when that album came out, he even said it like, I'll take Quali and put him on a song with Jay-Z, right? He put Freeway on a song with Mos Def. He was
Right.
putting collaborations together that were kind of unheard of before then. I mean, they were only heard of in the sense that he had his production out and he was producing for both camps, but you really weren't hearing songs now. It's like the next logical, I guess, iteration of that would be putting rappers on both sides on the same song. So we just talked about a while back here about this hard division that existed. You're mainstream, you're corny. No, I'm underground, I'm mainstream. Kanye was saying, what underground, what mainstream? Like, I'm gonna bring them all together. I'm gonna put these underground rappers on songs with these mainstream rappers, and I'm gonna make Common a mainstream rapper. Common was more of that underground stuff. Right? I mean, he was very well known and respected amongst hip hop heads and in the game. He made Common commercial. He put Common into Starbucks. You know what I mean? Like, he took these underground rappers and made them commercial, and he really blurred the lines. Now, some of those lines I think we're beginning to blur already with the internet, because this is around the time the internet is coming up. And that's why I say on the song, even casual fans began turning to the internet because the radio and MTV kind of lost the prominence that it had up until that point, right? It started to become more about let me go online and look for my music that way. And when that started happening, I think it was only natural that the lines wouldn't be so hard and fast anymore. It wasn't like before. You only ever got music on MTV, the radio, or on Tower Records.
Right.
That was the case.
There weren't many other outlets. I mean, there were some independent things like, like Uncle Ralph's thing
You had to know about it. It was more like a secret society. But
right. It wasn't just out there. But in every
yeah,
city had little
right.
places
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like that.
But
Yeah.
again, it wasn't like everyone was in
Shout
on
out to
it.
Tallahassee Underground Railroad,
Yeah, the cop shop in Long Island, or even like
Cop
Fat
Shop in Long
Beats,
Island,
Beat Street
Fab.
Records in Brooklyn. I would go to all these places, but most people weren't. Most people in the world didn't know about any of that stuff. But with the internet, that did start to change, right? Because the distinction between mainstream and underground wasn't as pronounced as it used to be. It was just everyone's online now. There used to be a thing about internet rappers. Remember this? People used to say, "Oh, they're just an
Yeah, yeah,
internet rapper. They don't, you're not a real
yeah.
rapper. You're just a rapper on the internet." Now, like we were talking about before, everyone's a damn internet rapper and they're making millions of dollars. And that's so it's a whole different world. So there's no longer this mainstream and stores and on TV, underground in the streets. Everyone's online now. So what's the difference, right? So
All right. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's been a big transition, right? With a lot of that. Even some of the more hardcore rappers who were against that type of stuff, they're on Twitter like talking stuff now. It's like
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. 50 Cent trolling on IG.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
constantly.
And so,
Uh,
this is kind of a combination of factors, I think, right? I think a lot of it is Kanye moving that ball and kind of it happening the way it did. Maybe some of that was happenstance. Some of it was happening already, with
yeah,
the
it was definitely happening. Yeah.
it was gonna happen anyway. But uh, the bottom line is after this chain of events, right? Rawkus passing on Kanye, kind of going on to Def Jam, blowing up the way he did, bringing these rappers with him. Like we said, Common now starting to do major motion pictures and all this like crazy stuff. Most Def also, right? Like, these underground rappers have become big stars, thanks in large part to what Kanye did. So the game just changed. The world just changed after that, right? For better
Yeah,
or for
yeah.
worse. We came out of that raucous era in a different world.
Right.
And, you know, I was talking about before, I'm excited about the opportunities this new world presents. So it isn't all bad, but I do think we're missing some of that raucous. Again, it's the spirit, it's the aesthetic. Cool G Rap, here's a tidbit. He didn't like the word spirit. I actually asked him originally if he can say, let's bring the spirit back. And he didn't want to say that. And I found out because I guess his religious leanings, whatever, he thought that was sacrilegious or too close to invoking Jesus or something like that. So, we don't have to go there. The essence, let's bring it back to the essence, right? That's what we landed on. And
Right.
now and that's what I think, we need some of that. We need some more of that. Let's bring that lyricism back to the forefront. Let's bring rapping back to the forefront. You don't have to do it in an obscure way that's not going to reach any more than 10 people. You can do it in a more commercial style. But let's strive for that. Let's strive for elevating lyricism again and rapping again. I mean, I think that's kind of the message behind all of this. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can find creative ways to do it. Do it in the context of what's happening today. But don't think because I see this now. I see, and then this kind of upsets me when I see people say lyrics are dead. Basically, like people say they don't even try to write good lyrics anymore. They don't even try to spit hot raps anymore. No one cares about that. They just want to have something that sounds hot. Maybe they auto tune their way through a verse, but they're not really putting an effort into it. And I'm saying, let's bring some of that rocket spirit or essence back.
Right. And to be fair, there are people who have that who say that, who definitely say that. It's about vibes. It's
Right,
not
right,
about
right.
lyrics. I mean, and it's not completely new. It started with I would say the seeds of it was in the Lil Wayne era. And the people that came out of that. And I remember Waka Flocka saying in an interview about, and he was saying that, yeah, we don't care about no lyrics, something like that. And And that's been kind of the blueprint for a lot of folks. But I think today there is a little bit more of a balance now than there was then with people like I said, Cole and Kendrick are also mainstream artists, and then you have your others that are, I don't know, the names, the baby and all of those type of guys, the little whoever's.
Well,
Um, but
yeah. The good thing also about this era is that you can find your audience because with the algorithms that we have and with the access to data that we have, there are still people who are fans of that subgenre, if you want to call it that, who want to hear lyricism, who want to hear more songs like Cool G Rap or like early Kanye or like any of these things. And
right,
so you can target them, right? If you're making music in that vein, you can find them, but you can deliberately target that audience. And there are millions of people in that audience. So it's easier in that sense to get your music to the right people. Before it was kind of like a crapshoot, right? Like you kind of had to maybe through the scene or like through other efforts try to maneuver your way before the right audience. But now it's just so much more conveniently done, right? Like you can put an ad out and type in artists that you think you sound like or that you're similar to, and it'll push your song out to everyone who likes those artists. I mean, and that's exciting from a business standpoint, right? From just the aspect of, wow, like, all right, what is my market? I can pick out millions of people who listen to this kind of music. The people who are listening to the early Kanye CDs haven't all died. They're still listening to that kind of music. You can find them. You can go to them, and you know what I mean?
they're out
And
there.
yeah, your audience is probably out there. Now, some audiences are going to be smaller than others, depending on how niche your music is, right? But you can figure out how big that audience is and find those people. And to me, that's a great thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're out there like Bigfoot.
Nah, they're not though. They're very accessible. And in fact, you can go on your Spotify for artists or Apple Music, any of these things, and see what your demographics are. I'm seeing where the cities are that are playing my music the most. And what does that tell me? Like, if we're putting together a show, let's say we want to do a tour. If you know you have 1,000 fans in this city, great, I'm going there. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Absolutely. That's
yeah,
yeah. It's the benefit of data,
yeah,
of utilizing data.
absolutely. And so that, it's really, to me, all the stuff is really exciting in a way that I didn't know I would be excited by it, right? Because I went to law school and I kind of took myself out of the music industry, right? Still was creating the stuff, but I wasn't releasing. And
Right.
at that time, we were kind of on the cusp of things changing, right? Things going from the very beginning, the infancy of streaming, but really more in that era of selling CDs, but people weren't buying them anymore. So like, what are you going to do? Like, it was just kind of like a depressing time to be an artist commercially because people stopped buying CDs, but there really wasn't any money in streaming either. So it was just like everything was kind of like dead at that point.
There's still really no money in streaming.
There is though. There is
There
now.
is,
Now there
there
is.
really isn't, for the majority of people, there isn't any money in streaming. I mean,
I
we
think
got to be honest. I understand being hopeful and seeing the numbers move up, and that's
yeah.
all great. But there's fractions of a fraction of a penny per stream,
I know, but
and
you can
you got to
get
do like
thousands and millions of streams though.
yeah, 1,000 streams is like equivalent to what you would have gotten paid off of selling
True.
one album. Like
That's true, but you don't have to sell the album anymore. And
it's a
there's some
big
great.
ripoff. It's a big
I hear
ripoff.
you. I hear you. If you break it down to the price per stream, it is kind of
It's
humiliating.
insulting.
It's
It's
insulting.
insulting. And in
But I didn't. But here's the
Spotify,
thing. Yeah, but here's the thing. Yes, we can talk about all. I agree. They're ripping people off. But broadly speaking, DSPs are doing that. But here's my thing. When we released our music in that era, that cusp period where people were not buying CDs anymore, but streaming was very slow. It was so depressing because you would look at stream, you think, okay, I can make some money off of streams, but it's like they're trickling in. They were just so small. 12 streams, yay! How many fractions of a penny is that? It was nothing. It was just a complete joke. Now, if you can see, like, all right, overnight you made a few bucks off this one song. Now what if you ramp up that effort and now you put out multiple songs and you keep grinding it out. Yeah, it's still per stream. It sucks, but you can get into the thousands of streams. You can get into the millions of streams and start making money. There's an opportunity there, and there are people who are doing it. There are people who are
There are
doing
definitely
it
people who are
streams a
doing it.
day,
Yeah.
like 90 grand a month off of streaming alone. So I mean, there
Yeah.
are opportunities there.
There are people who are definitely doing it. We mentioned a couple of them.
Yeah,
There are definitely people who are doing it.
yeah,
Um, I think I sent you something recently of a guy who his that's his whole strategy is to just flood the services with music constantly
right.
because he's like, yeah, if I've got 1,000 songs released and each one of them are getting like, 10 streams each, that's like 10,000 streams a month. Like,
Right. Right.
he's like, there's just numbers.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was his whole strategy. And he was making a lot of money off of
Yeah.
it doing that way. Um,
Some
but
of the artists that we mentioned, and that sounds more like maybe a scam or something. Like if he's just putting out songs that don't have any quality to them, just for the sake of having them out, that's one thing. But some of the artists that we mentioned who are doing monster streams have a similar type mentality. They're still trying to put out good music,
sure,
but
sure, sure.
it is about quantity. They're trying to release every month, every 2 weeks. I'm doing every week. And the idea is
Right,
the more songs you have out there, the fewer streams you need on each song. You don't need one song to be a number one hit and do
right.
10 million streams to make money. No, you can just have 1,000 songs, each doing a little bit, and it's the same thing numerically.
Yeah, every 6 months I make about enough to get
Hamburger.
yeah, like a combo meal off of the Nas song that I
Oh yeah.
have own part of. So yeah, actually there's two of them, the Nas song and I forget the other guy, some big DJ. I
Oh,
own the streams a portion of streaming from some of them. So as long as they continue to push their songs, I get small royalties coming in. And yeah, it's
so
like
everybody go and stream, bring Rawkus Back, and then Ultra Black by Nas, right?
Ultra Black by Nas. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This
Go
way,
go pump
Jay
that.
Jay can afford lunch tomorrow, or maybe a coffee.
Yeah, that's the jam right there.
No, but and listen, and I'm going to be testing this out in different ways, using what I've learned of the algorithm, seeing what works, what doesn't, going through the iterations, trying to pump out a lot of content. My goal is to get the album that I'm going to put out because we're going to do several singles leading to the album in pretty quick succession here.
Right.
And I do want to have 1 million streams on the album in give or take a year. Maybe that's a lofty goal, and that's not a whole lot of money. That's maybe like 4 grand or so, whatever, give or take. But to me, I'm looking at it as like the next threshold to cross. If I'm going to really turn this into a business that I'm going to make serious income off of, I know it's going to involve at some point releasing a lot of songs frequently, which is something we haven't done. Like we've been that type of artists who take our time with it. We want to put together like the perfect product. And unfortunately, I think in today's world, if you're trying to really monetize this to its full potential, you have to let go of some of that. And you have to just be of the mindset that I'm going to be releasing music constantly.
Yeah, I mean, if that's your goal, right? I mean, that's kind of also what the guy at Spotify, the head guy at Spotify said when because people were criticizing him because he still fights to reduce the amount per stream that people should be paid. And this past year, they actually, instead of being able to do it per stream, they actually set a threshold and said, well, you know what? We're not going to pay royalties for any songs that don't have 1,000 streams in the past 365 days. So all those people who lost a few pennies or whatever, but it's still their stuff. That's a whole
Yeah.
different conversation.
Right.
However,
That saved them like
his response
$40 million a year.
his response to that was
Not more music.
that
Right.
make more content.
Right.
Like just keep making more content.
Yeah.
Like basically give us more content and maybe you'll make more money.
But here's my question though. Didn't you just say it was 1,000 streams per song that you needed?
Per song.
So if you're making more songs, it doesn't really answer that concern. Like
I know it doesn't, but that's yeah.
Right? Like because it's one thing if you can be like, all right, well, to get my 1,000 streams, I'm gonna put out 100 songs, 10 streams each. Aha. He's saying no, you need one song to get all 1,000. And so the idea of, well, just make more songs. No, you still got to find that song with a
Each
thousand
song
streams.
still has to have a
Right.
thousand
The ones
streams
that
each,
don't
and
get
you
a
don't
thousand
get
streams
paid.
won't get anything. So yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but
So it's ridiculous.
here's where maybe it makes a little bit sense if you know the Spotify algorithm, right? Because it's basically designed to create momentum and to build off of the momentum that you're generating. And so, like what you want to do. I mean, well, I don't want to get too technical, I guess, but the idea of getting on release radar and then getting it in front of all these different people. Like if you do a collaboration, you get it from their audience also. And then if it builds up momentum, it gets a certain popularity score based on the streams in the first week and based on the likes and the saves and the playlist ads. And then that determines its placement on Rap Radar the next week. And it can go on up for up to 28 days, I think it is, which is, I say Rap Radar, I mean Release Radar, putting it on in different people's Spotify. So that it's basically suggesting it to them and then actively going. So it's a way to kind of get your music out there more organically, I guess. But then you ideally will start building up an audience by doing that, building up followers. And then when you release your next song, it starts off in front of a bigger audience because it's automatically going to go to people who are already following you. If they've interacted with your music before and they've liked it and they've added it to their playlist or whatever, it has a bigger chance of it reaching them in the future. And so I guess the whole philosophy behind this is basically build momentum by consistently releasing music to the point where you'll be getting those numbers.
That's what they say.
Yeah, I mean, easier said than done, sure, but
that's what they say. That's what they say.
We've got data. We've got data, right? So to me, again, not easy and maybe not ideal still, but different and something that you can leverage. You've got data, and so you can try things and you can see what's working and the extent to which it is working and adjust accordingly. So it isn't like taking a bunch of shots in the dark.
Right. You can make informed decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, go stream Bring Rawkus Back. Then go stream Nas Ultra Black. And then also go stream Diplo, Don't Forget My Love.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Yeah, that's the other one. That's the other one. Yeah. So. All right.
Yeah, I mean, you can do a whole course on the algorithm, right? Spotify algorithm, the TikTok algorithm, all these different things.
Sure.
It's a whole new world, and it's exciting. It's there are pros and cons as with anything, but
right, absolutely.
I myself am excited. I think that's at least for now the takeaway. You know what I mean? A lot of it is just this idea that, hey, listen, people are hearing the damn song. I mean, I think that's like every artist's worst nightmare. I mean, some people make it just for the sake of creating it, but if you really want your music to be heard, you don't want to spend all that time working on it only to put it out and not get any attention, not get anyone to even listen to it. Of course, there are people like some of the artists we talked about who are killing it on streaming who say you shouldn't attach yourself emotionally to any of your songs. Again, this is to them strictly a business, and so you put out a song that doesn't work, who cares? Put out another song. That's kind of how they approach it.
Yeah, some people look at that. That's another conversation where you're looking at it, music versus content. Like, oh, it's just content. Like, it does, but is it music? Are you putting an album together? Are you putting a concept? Are you putting songs and effort behind it, or is it just content that you're putting out there?
True, and that also plays into the whole single versus album discussion, which is a whole other thing too.
Yeah. So, anyway, different, whole other thing.
Yeah.
We definitely need to get into before we wrap up. We need to get into.
We had some other stuff.
Yeah, we did. At least get into the poll.
Yeah,
and let's definitely do that. And this thing about the Arabic numbers.
Okay.
We gotta touch on this quickly here.
All right. So
there was a poll. There was a poll that went out by an American market research company called Civic Science. And they put out a bunch of different questions to the people. And one of the questions was, should schools in America teach Arabic numerals as part of their curriculum? And they didn't give any sort of like primer or explain it. That was just the poll. And the idea was to kind of see, where people were at, what's going to prevail. 56% of Americans and average together said they don't want Arabic numerals taught in schools. Now, this is just this is just so you can't face palm any harder than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's and here's the break apart of it is that it wasn't just, I mean, you would think, okay, this we know who these people were. And it's not completely true because 72% were identified as Republican, which that's not so surprising, unfortunately, but 40% identified as Democrat. And to me, that was more surprising that it was that high. Like I can see the
Hold on a
72%
second.
of Republican,
40%
especially
of
MAGA.
40% of the people who said no, it should not be taught in schools, said they were Democrats.
Right.
Right.
And 72% said they were Republicans.
Yeah.
Um,
You see, I think, honestly, I think this is largely just people not knowing what Arabic numerals are.
but that's the thing, like how? How
Because
do
it's
you
not
not
taught.
know that
Because it's not
every
taught in schools. That's the thing. So that's why I'm not too surprised that Democrats are saying that. I think a
it
lot of
was
people
taught in
don't
schools?
know.
What
They're
schools
thinking
are these
of the
people going
Arabic
to?
language, and they're thinking of a whole different set of numbers. Probably like you know, let's translate our numbers into Arabic somehow. When I went to school, I don't think they ever specifically said these are Arabic numerals. I don't think they ever taught us that.
What schools are these? Every school I went to, like it was everyone knew this. These were Arabic numerals. They were called Arabic numerals. Like
I
it's
don't
crazy.
recall. Yeah, I don't recall them ever saying that when I was in school pre 9/11.
It's crazy to me. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, yeah,
Pre 9/11, I wonder, like you mentioned that, and I wonder if they stopped saying that
probably. Like I
after
said,
9/11. But
it probably stopped to the extent that they were saying it already, which I don't think was very big. I don't think many people were. Maybe they were saying that more like in the 70s and 80s than they were in the 90s. I don't know.
I don't know, that it's just so surprising to me. Um, that's it's really like I said, you can't face palm any harder than that.
Right.
You know, this was
I
one of a
thought,
number of questions that they asked, but it was just like this is so
and so
ridiculous.
the majority of Americans, according to this, say no, there should be no Arabic numerals in school.
Well, which translates to the majority of Americans have no idea what numbers that they use.
Right. Right. And there is, I'm sure, xenophobia and bigotry baked into that as well, because even if they don't know, they're saying, "Oh hell no, you ain't teaching the Arabic stuff to my kid," right?
Right. I think that that's kind of the point of just leaving it out there like that, right?
Mhm.
According to the article here, they were saying that the survey wasn't just about knowledge and ignorance, though. They looked at the split to gain insight into bias and prejudice as well. So, yeah, it tells me it says a lot to me. First of all, schools need to step it up. If kids don't know that these are Arabic numbers,
See, we were taught Roman numerals. Were you taught those?
yeah, absolutely. Roman numerals, we
Yeah.
talk Arabic numerals.
That's really where I think the confusion comes in, because people know what Roman numerals are. They might not be able to tell you or
I
express
wonder,
in Roman numerals, but they've heard of it. They're familiar with the idea of Roman numerals, right? So when they hear Arabic numerals, I think that's what they're thinking in their heads. They're thinking, oh, like another kind of Roman numeral, but only Arabic this time.
but that's a problem.
It is a problem. Sure, sure. I agree.
Yeah.
Not to mention our language, right? In part comes from Arabic. We were taught that. It comes from the Greek and Arabic and these different Latin, whatever. But I think maybe we should be getting back to that. Maybe if kids are taught that, that will do a little bit to lessen xenophobia.
Well, that's the thing is like I don't recall, this xenophobia type of thing against Arabs growing up. I
Because
mean,
that
I
was
think
9/11. That's why.
9/11 played a large part of
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
The right wing played a large part in it, pushing this fear agenda type of thing. But I mean, we recognize these. We knew that these were Arabic numbers, right? I mean, what was
You knew
one of the stories that we learned growing up, Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. Like everyone knows these types of things, right?
they
We
were that was connected to the numbers. I
not
was you
connected to
learned
the
about that.
numbers, but I mean, as far as Arabic stuff coming into our our environment, right?
Yeah,
There was,
super on that.
Aladdin is
Yeah, yeah,
all
yeah, yeah,
takes place in the
absolutely. No,
Middle
you're right.
East.
And yeah, and that was portrayed pre 9/11 as cute, right? Like, yeah.
Right.
Uh,
We know these stories,
no one ever really thought twice about it. It wasn't linked to terrorism and all that kind of stuff until after. That's certainly true.
absolutely.
And if you were to ask Americans pre 9/11, should Arabic numerals be taught in school, you'd probably get a different result. Maybe more people, even if they didn't know what it was, would be like, why not? Teach them Greek, teach them Arabic, teach them every language.
But that answer is a problem.
It's ignorant, but at least it's not bigoted.
True, 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 true.
Yeah.
So, that was my big surprise of the week.
Okay. I've heard that question posed before. I never saw it put as an official poll of Americans, but I saw it on social media before, and I saw people making fun of that before. Like let's basically troll people with that question to see who gets worked up about it.
Right.
That's been making the rounds for decades now.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so it's I don't know.
All right. So, is there an appropriate prize to award these respondents?
I know where you're going with it,
I can think of
and I
one off
think
the top.
so.
Yeah. Let's do it. You get the rubber chicken of the week.
Yeah. If you are American and you don't know that these are are Arabic numerals,
It's okay if you don't know.
no, it's not. It is not
It's,
okay.
it's less okay if you think that they should not be taught because you think that nothing Arabic should be taught to children.
It is not okay. It is not okay
One should know.
at all.
Yeah.
Not okay at all. No, I can't give a pass. I can't give a pass to that. So,
Yeah. Hopefully more people will start to learn this as they're embarrassed by not knowing it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so much that uh, should be common sense. And this is definitely one of the things. So, anyway.
Like I said, I don't think I was ever taught that. I can't recall being specifically taught that. I learned that later on, but I don't think they ever said we're going to teach you the Arabic numbers. They just taught us numbers.
Okay, okay. I'm just saying.
We teach you how to count 1, 2, 3. They didn't say we're going to teach you the Arabic numerals. I don't think it's just, you know what it is? I don't even think it was maybe intentional. It was just you're teaching kindergartners about numbers. It's hard enough to get them to learn 1 and 2 and 3 and how to add and all that kind of stuff. You're probably not going to get them to learn Arabic numerals. It's too much for a kindergartner to say.
It doesn't have to start there. You've got 12 years of
Yeah, but by then
compulsory education.
by then you get older. By the time you're old enough to know that to understand that term,
No, I can't give any passes on
learn your
this.
numbers right. It's like your ABCs. You know what I mean?
I can't give any passes on this. I can't.
I just don't think it's ever like maybe where you went to school. I can't recall. That could be something we could ask people too. When you were in school, do you remember them teaching you specifically? We're going to learn now about the Arabic numerals. I don't remember them saying it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe now we were going to use this exact phrasing, this exact question as the poll.
All right.
Should we change that poll to be were you taught that these were the numbers that we use are Arabic numerals?
Were you taught in school?
Yeah, were you taught in school? Maybe that should be the poll instead.
Yeah, I'm with it.
All right, let's try that.
Okay. How are we going to phrase that? 1, 2, 3. I'm trying to say this out loud now without having a visual aid to look at these
Were the
numbers.
number were you taught in school that the numbers that we use
Gotcha.
are not Roman,
Ah,
are Arabic numerals?
okay, we can rock with that.
All
So
right.
the poll question of the week is: were you taught that the numbers we use in school are Arabic numerals? Is that phrased correctly, or should it
Were
be
you taught in school?
school that the numbers we
Yeah,
use?
let's try it again. Take two.
Me too. The poll question of the week is: were you taught in school that the numbers we use are Arabic numerals?
All right, now that's yeah, it's not a good fact finding or information finding poll in that regard. So
I like it. And before we wrap up, we had a poll last week, right?
We did have a poll last week. The poll last week was about spying on campaigns. So we put the question out, should spying on opposing political campaigns be subject to criminal prosecution? And that was based on an article that came out that where some volunteers for campaigns were talking about their experience, saying that they were being asked by the campaign to infiltrate, so to speak, opposing campaigns. And actually, one of the people mentioned in the article was one of the former guests of ours. So the response was to, should spying on opposing political campaigns be subject to criminal prosecution? 85% said yes, 15% said no.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm starting to see a pattern with these polls. It seems like if you pose a question about, should justice be delivered hard on something that they think is wrong, they tend to say yes.
Mm,
It doesn't tend to be a whole lot of nuance in, well, I don't necessarily agree with this behavior, but I don't think it rises to the level of criminality. I haven't seen that in our results yet. It tends to be, if they think something is wrong, they want the person thrown in jail and the key swallowed.
and I guess there could be some different aspects to that that lead to this. Perhaps it's the only options of yes, no
Right.
that we present. That could be one factor.
Yeah.
Um, it could also be an indication of how we've got such a broken criminal justice system as it is, where it's only focusing on punishment. It's just a reflection of the idea of people that, oh, if you did something bad, it has to come down, the hammer has to come down hard,
Right.
instead of finding that nuance.
Right. Right. It does surprise me a little bit because we say that the site that the poll primarily goes on tends to lean to the left. Yet
Yeah,
they do seem to come down pretty harshly, it seems.
sometimes, yeah, yeah.
But they also might be thinking of it in terms of attempts to subvert democracy and things like that. So that maybe their liberal leanings come into play when they start putting it into that context of, oh, we see this coming from the right a lot, and maybe we need to go after people who don't take democracy seriously.
True, true. That's another thing to think about as well in that regard. So yeah, interesting results.
Interesting. Yeah. Do we have any interesting comments on that one, or not really?
No, actually, I'm surprised there weren't any comments on this one.
Okay. Yeah, because usually a lot of people chime in with these ideas that we find intriguing.
Yeah, but
Um,
no, this time there weren't.
See, to me, I think again, probably a lot of this comes down to the binary nature of these polls, the yes or the no, because
Sure,
spying can mean a whole lot of different things. We talked about it last week, right? And so
sure, sure.
you want to throw everyone in prison who commits anything that can be described as spying? Probably not, but maybe certain things you might want to punish more harshly. It depends on what you're doing, right? Like
Right,
showing up to their rally and reporting back in a public space. That's within your constitutionally protected activities. You can't punish someone legally for that. But
right,
going undercover and basically defrauding someone, right, convincing them you're someone that you're not, then you start to get into a different realm.
right, right.
Yeah.
So, all
Oh,
right. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. You
see,
want to
I'm going
drop
to
the
leave
bottom?
the bottom line because my bottom line would simply be bring Rawkus back.
We can go with that.
That's a cop out answer, no?
Um, Maybe bring that spirit,
The essence.
um, that that
Yeah.
that came with Rawkus and the environment that Rawkus type of music brought about, right? That independent but still accessible, still able to reach wider audiences, still lyricism,
Yeah.
still had aspects of the essence of the art and the genre and the culture, but also was shared, in a bigger platform. So bring that type of thing back. And I think that also can fit with that ideology in politics and in
Yes.
society,
Yes.
because
Yes.
we want to honor and have the essence of what the culture and the country should be, stemming from like the Constitution and things like that, but have that be what's in the modern era as well.
I love it. I love it because I was thinking that also when you're going through it, you can take this philosophy and apply it beyond the music space, and you just did that there. So yeah, excellent, excellent. Let's bring
Bring the
Rawkus back.
Constitution back. Bring the
Yeah.
Constitution back.
Oh,
We
yes,
might,
that's the remix right there.
that's the remix. Bring the Constitution back. That's the remix for election night.
First Amendment back. Yeah,
Yeah, bring
I like it.
yeah,
So we said we would check back in on the streams. We're up to 2,222. I think we started
nice.
with 9. So there you go. What is that? 13 more over the course of the show. I mean, so I think that's pretty good. It's moving up pretty consistently.
Absolutely.
So let's
Very
keep
good. Very good.
that momentum building, and let's prove that streaming can be lucrative. I'm with it. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in. We've got work to do, and we'll catch you next time.